A North Texas man convicted in a pastor's murder more than a decade ago is set to be executed. State records show Steven Nelson's execution scheduled for early February. Nelson was convicted of killing the Reverend Clint Dobson at NorthPointe Baptist Church and assaulting his assistant.
It's hard at times, because you're waiting to be put to death. So that kind of breaks a little part of you every day. Kind of breaks you every day. And sometimes I have to catch myself, for being overwhelmed and stressed out, and like force myself to eat because it does that to you where you just don't want to do nothing.
A man who once laughed in the face of death will soon face it himself, with no one around to hear his laughter. The prison cell was cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Steven Nelson stood there, awaiting a fate he had long known was coming. His execution was a mere 24 hours away, but there was something else. The finality in his own reflection. No more victims. No more games. But it was too late to turn back the clock. It was the night before he would be strapped to a gurney, and no one knew what he was truly thinking, only that he had never once shown remorse for the lives he took. Imagine being caught between the world you once knew and the grim reality of the one you're about to leave behind. For Steven, it wasn't about fear. It wasn't about regret. It was about silence. The deafening silence in the days leading up to his execution. The type that gnaws at your soul, stripping away any remaining semblance of who you were. Behind bars, he'd learned to face death with a kind of eerie calm, but the people he left behind would never have that peace. On that final night, there was no family by his side, no long-lost friends making amends. Instead, there was a stranger, his wife, Helen, who had been a constant source of support, writing him letters and organizing rallies from across the world. She stood on the other side of a glass barrier, just as she had during their entire marriage. A marriage forged in the sterile and lonely halls of death row. Her love for him seemed unconditional. Yet how does a woman reconcile with the man she loved, knowing what he had done? When Nelson's last words were spoken, they were not directed at the families who had suffered, those whose lives were forever scarred by his violence. No, his words were for Helen. "I love you," he said. And with those words, he passed into a death that he had been preparing for his entire life. But that's not where this story begins. The true beginning stretches back to a small town in Oklahoma, a place where his early life unfolded under the weight of neglect, abuse, and constant disregard for the rules of society. Growing up in a family torn apart by violence, Steven Nelson's path was set long before he ever picked up a weapon. His story is a tragic one, a chain of events leading from a broken childhood to a life marked by crime and ultimately, execution. There were no real signs of redemption in his life. Each mistake, each misstep, fed into the next one. As a young child, he was already showing traits of aggression, breaking rules and acting out. Those early signs were overlooked, dismissed, or ignored, and by the time he was in his teens, it was too late. The behavior escalated, leading him into increasingly violent and dangerous acts. So how did someone like Steven Nelson come to take not one, but two lives? How did a young man from a fractured family transform into a killer? The day he walked into that church in Arlington, Texas, everything he had been up until then had led to that moment. The brutality that followed was not just an isolated event. It was a culmination of years of rage, neglect, and mental health struggles that never truly got the attention they needed. We are about to take a deep dive into the harrowing details of that fateful day, exploring what led Nelson to that church, the toll it took on the community, and the long road of justice that followed. But before we do, a warning. This case involves disturbing and intense details. Viewer discretion is advised. To all our current and past subscribers, thank you for helping grow our community and spread the awareness of these tragic stories. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from. Your support truly helps us keep these cases alive and in the public eye. And now, welcome to the final hour. Steven Lawayne Nelson was born on February 18, 1987, in Ada, Oklahoma. Raised in a turbulent household, Nelson's early life was marked by neglect and abuse. His father was frequently incarcerated, and his mother often left him and his siblings unsupervised for extended periods. This unstable environment left a profound impact on Nelson, shaping his worldview and behavior in ways that would later manifest in criminal activity. From a young age, Nelson exhibited troubling behavior. At 3 years old, he attempted to set his mother's mattress on fire, an early indication of his propensity for violence. By 6, he was already involved in property crimes, burglaries, and thefts. Despite interventions by juvenile authorities, including counseling and probation, Nelson's criminal behavior escalated. He was incarcerated in a high-risk juvenile detention center due to his continued involvement in felonies. As a teenager, Nelson's offenses became more serious. At 14, he was arrested for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, burglary, and criminal trespassing, leading to a sentence at the Texas Youth Commission. Initially sentenced to 9 months, he served over 3.5 years due to repeated infractions and disciplinary issues. His time in juvenile detention was marked by numerous high-level disciplinary hearings, underscoring his inability to conform to institutional rules. Upon release, Nelson's criminal activities persisted. At 18, he was arrested for driving a stolen car. 2 years later, in November 2007, he stole a laptop from a Walmart by concealing it in his pants. The following week, he was caught again at a different Walmart in Arlington for stealing boots by wearing them out of the store without paying. These incidents were part of a pattern of theft and deceit that characterized much of his adult life. In 2010, after being released from state jail, Nelson assaulted his then live-in girlfriend. He was indicted for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon after the victim filed a complaint against him. 3 days later, his girlfriend filed a non-prosecution affidavit to drop the charges, but the district attorney denied it due to Nelson's extensive criminal record. He was subsequently placed on probation and sent to a 90-day program at the Intermediate Sanctions Facility. Despite these interventions, Nelson's criminal behavior continued unabated, setting the stage for the tragic events that would follow. On March 3, 2011, 24-year-old Steven Nelson, still on probation for the assault of his girlfriend, entered NorthPointe Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas. Inside, 28-year-old Pastor Clint Dobson and 69-year-old church secretary Judy Elliott were present. Nelson's initial intent was to rob the church, but the situation quickly escalated into violence. Nelson attacked Pastor Dobson first, using a computer extension cord to strangle him before smothering him with a plastic bag. Judy Elliott was severely beaten, suffering traumatic injuries to her face, head, arms, legs, and back. Despite the brutal assault, she managed to survive and later provided crucial testimony against Nelson. After the attack, Nelson stole Dobson's laptop, a cell phone, Elliott's credit cards, and her car. He later used the credit cards to purchase new clothes and jewelry and sold the laptop for money. His actions were not only violent, but also indicative of a complete disregard for human life and property. The crime was discovered when church member Dale Harwell arrived at the church for a scheduled meeting with Pastor Dobson, but found the building unusually quiet. Upon further investigation, he discovered the bodies of Dobson and Elliott. Elliott, though gravely injured, was still alive and was rushed to the hospital. Pastor Dobson, however, was pronounced dead at the scene. Following the brutal attack, law enforcement agencies launched an intensive investigation. Evidence collected from the crime scene, including fingerprints, DNA, and stolen items, directly linked Steven Nelson to the murder of Pastor Clint Dobson and the assault on Judy Elliott. Surveillance footage showed Nelson using the stolen credit cards, further corroborating his involvement. During questioning, Nelson initially denied committing the murder, suggesting that 2 friends were responsible. However, his story was inconsistent and contradicted by the evidence. His attempt to shift blame was unsuccessful, and he was charged with capital murder. At trial, the prosecution presented a compelling case, highlighting Nelson's extensive criminal history and the severity of the crime. The defense argued that Nelson had acted impulsively and was influenced by external factors, but this argument failed to sway the jury. On October 8, 2012, Nelson was convicted of capital murder and attempted capital murder. The sentencing phase of the trial was marked by emotional testimony from Judy Elliott, who survived the attack and identified Nelson as her assailant. Despite his lack of remorse, Nelson was sentenced to death. The jury's decision reflected the gravity of his actions and the community's demand for justice. Nelson's appeals were numerous, but ultimately unsuccessful. His conviction and sentence were upheld by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, and subsequent federal appeals were also denied. Despite efforts to challenge his death sentence, including a petition for a writ of certiorari to the United States Supreme Court, Nelson's legal avenues were exhausted. The impact of Steven Nelson's crimes was profound and far-reaching. Pastor Clint Dobson's death left a void in the Arlington community, and Judy Elliott's traumatic experience served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of individuals in places of worship. The case garnered significant media attention, sparking debates over issues such as the death penalty, criminal justice reform, and the safety of public spaces. Judy Elliott, despite her injuries, became a symbol of resilience and courage. Her decision to testify against Nelson, despite the personal cost, provided a measure of justice and closure for the community. In 2024, she passed away, a year before Nelson's execution, but her legacy lived on through her family's forgiveness and the lessons imparted by her ordeal. Steven Nelson's execution on February 5, 2025, marked the end of a long legal battle. His final words were directed to his wife, Helen Noah Dubois, whom he had married while on death row. He expressed love and a desire for peace, but notably did not address the victims or their families. His execution was a somber reminder of the consequences of a life led astray and the finality of justice. The case of Steven Nelson serves as a tragic narrative of a life marred by early trauma, a series of poor choices, and the devastating impact of unchecked anger and violence. It underscores the importance of early intervention, the need for effective rehabilitation programs, and the profound effects that early life experiences can have on an individual's future actions. We'd love to hear your perspective on this matter. Do you believe that justice was truly achieved in this case? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Your insights are valuable to us. And while you're here, don't forget to click the subscribe button to support our continued work and stay updated on our latest content.